I never set out to betray the man who had once been my world. Adrian was everything a woman could want: handsome, successful, devoted. Yet, somewhere between our vows and the silent dinners, I lost sight of the love that once burned between us. Maybe it was routine. Maybe it was the quiet way he kissed my forehead instead of my lip. Maybe it was me. I met Ethan on a Tuesday afternoon, completely by accident. Rain had begun to fall as I rushed down the busy street, the cold droplets soaking through my silk blouse. The cafe's warm glow beckoned me inside, promising temporary refuge. I barely noticed the man sitting at the counter until he turned and met my gaze. Striking blue eyes. A smirk that hinted at mischief. "Looks like you could use a coffee," he said, motioning to the empty seat beside him. I hesitated. Strangers never intrigued me, but something about him felt different. Dangerous. "I don't usually take coffee with strangers," I replied. "Then let's change that." He extended his hand. Ethan. His confidence was intoxicating. I shook his hand, felt the warmth of his skin. Sophia. That first meeting should have been forgettable, a polite exchange, a passing moment in the endless stream of days. But it wasn't. I thought about him that night, and the next. Days later, I returned to the cafe, my heart racing as I stepped inside. He was there, waiting. A spark ignited between us, something I hadn't felt in years. Adrian was steady, predictable. Ethan was fire, uncontrolled, thrilling, forbidden. We talked, laughed. I told him things I hadn't even told my husband. Then, one evening, he brushed his fingers along my wrist. A small touch, yet it sent shivers through me. I should have pulled away. I should have walked out of that cafe and never looked back. Instead, I leaned in. And that was the beginning of my downfall. Would you like any refinements or more depth in certain areas? Lies have a way of tangling around you, growing tighter until there's no escape. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless. Meeting Ethan for coffee, stolen moments of laughter, the way his fingertips would graze mine just long enough to make my breath hitch. But soon, coffee turned into late-night drives. Innocent conversations became whispered confessions. And then, one evening, it went too far. Adrian was out of town for a business conference. At least, that's what I thought. I invited Ethan over, my pulse racing with anticipation. He arrived with that same cocky smirk, his presence overwhelming the space that had always belonged to my husband. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured, fingers tracing my jaw. "But you are." That was the last word spoken before our lips crashed together. Desperation. Lust. I lost myself in him, in the way he held me like I was the only woman in the world. His hands explored what had been untouched for too long, his breath against my skin sending waves of pleasure through me. The guilt that had gnawed at me in the beginning vanished. Until the front door creaked open. I froze. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs as the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Then, his voice. "Don't stop on my account. Adrian." A chill sliced through my veins. Ethan shot up, scrambling for his clothes. But Adrian didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on me. I pulled the sheets around my bare skin, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Adrian, don't," he cut in, his tone eerily calm. That was the worst part. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't throwing things. He just stood there. The man who had once loved me more than anything now looked at me like a stranger. Ethan, sensing the gravity of the situation, grabbed his jacket and disappeared. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone with my husband. The silence was unbearable. I wanted him to scream, to curse, to demand answers. Instead, he simply turned, walking toward the bedroom door. "Adrian, please." My voice cracked. "Say something." He stopped. For a moment I thought he might. Then, without looking back, he whispered the words that shattered me completely. "I don't think I care anymore." And with that, he was gone. The moment the door shut behind Adrian, the weight of my actions crashed down on me. I had expected rage, expected him to yell, to demand answers, to throw me out. But the cold detachment in his voice had cut deeper than any outburst ever could. "I don't think I care anymore." That single sentence repeated in my head like a cruel mantra, poisoning every thought, every breath. I sat there in the wreckage of my choices, the sheets still tangled around my trembling body. The scent of Ethan clung to my skin, but instead of excitement, all I felt was nausea. I rushed to the bathroom, gripping the sink as I fought the urge to break apart completely. My reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar. Eyes wide with panic, lips swollen from stolen kisses, guilt bleeding through every inch of my face. How had I let it come to this? Adrian didn't come home that night. Or the next. Each day stretched into unbearable silence. He didn't call. Didn't text. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist in his world. At first, I convinced myself he was processing, that eventually, we would have the explosive fight we needed. That I would cry, he would rage, and somehow, we would find a way to piece us back together. But as the days turned into a week, reality became impossible to ignore. He wasn't coming back. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I went to his office. His assistant gave me a pitying look before gently telling me he wasn't available. Panic set in. Adrian had always been the steady one, the man who never lost control, never acted on impulse. But this wasn't like him. One evening, I drove to his parents' house, hoping they had heard from him. His mother opened the door, her expression unreadable. "Where is he?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. A long pause. Then, "You should go home, Sophia," she said softly. "He doesn't want to see you." The door closed before I could beg, before I could explain. I was losing him. And worse, I didn't know if I could ever get him back. The realization shattered something inside me. I had destroyed my marriage for fleeting passion, for stolen moments with a man who had already moved on. Because Ethan never called again. He had been a fantasy, a reckless escape from the monotony of a love I had taken for granted. And now I was left with nothing. For the first time, true fear settled into my bones. I had hurt Adrian in a way that words could never fix, and I didn't know if he would ever forgive me. Would you like more emotional depth, or should I add additional twists to the storyline? I spent days drowning in regret, haunted by the weight of my betrayal. I had shattered the man who once loved me unconditionally, and now I was paying the price. But I wasn't ready to give up. One evening, desperation drove me to Adrian's office again. The receptionist hesitated before finally letting me in. My pulse pounded as I stepped inside his private space, a place I once belonged. He stood by the window, back to me, hands in his pockets. The city lights reflected against the glass, making his silhouette seem even more distant. "Adrian," I whispered. He didn't turn. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," I continued, voice shaking. "But I need you to know. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, and You don't love me." His voice was cold, detached. "You loved the idea of me. The stability. The security." I flinched. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes stole the air from my lungs. There was no warmth, no longing. Just a quiet finality. "I was never enough for you, Sophia," he said, his words like knives. "And I won't beg you to stay when you never truly wanted to." Tears blurred my vision. "Please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." He sighed, shaking his head. Then he pulled something from his desk and slid it toward me. A manila envelope. With trembling hands, I opened it. Divorce papers. A sob tore from my throat. "Adrian, no, please." His gaze was unwavering. "I deserve better." The reality crashed over me in full force. I had been clinging to a dream, a hope that he would give me another chance. But he had already made his choice. I had lost him. Forever. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. As I walked out of his office, broken beyond repair, I realized something. I thought catching me with another man would destroy him. But in the end, it was what he did next that shattered me completely. He let me go. And he never looked back.